Hey everyone, Steven here, and today I'm reviewing the Sceptre C505B-QSN168, which is a 49-inch Super Ultrawide monitor. As always, I'll be talking about the specs first before getting into what I like, don't like, and finishing with the gray area, which are things you may or may not care about. With that being said, let's get into the specs. The Sceptre C505B is a 49-inch edge-lit LED VA panel super ultrawide monitor with a 5120 by 1440p resolution and a 32:9 aspect ratio, which is equivalent to two 27-inch monitors next to each other. This has an 1800R curve, 120Hz refresh rate with a DP cable, and 60Hz refresh rate with an HDMI cable, and has a 4 millisecond gray-to-gray response time with overdrive enabled. For ports, you will find two HDMI 2.0, two DP 1.4, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. For color gamut, this covers 100% of the NTSC, 99% of the sRGB, and 90% of the DCI P3. This has a 3000 to 1 contrast ratio and a 1,000,000 to 1 dynamic contrast ratio. Typical brightness is 350 candela per square meter, which is nits, and this has HDR 400, although it's not certified by VESA, and this is 8-bit color with frame rate control, not 10-bit color. So what is frame rate control? Frame rate control manipulates pixels so they flash two alternating colors so quickly that you perceive any of the shades in a billion color experience. So no true 10-bit color here, just the frame rate control with the 8-bit color. This also doesn't have any local dimming zones. Next, the two speakers here are 3 watts each at 8 ohms. I'll do a test for these in a little bit. Inside of the box, you will find two DP cables, the power cable, a remote, user manual, the VESA mount screws, and the long and short mount standoffs, which this is a 75mm by 75mm pattern. For mechanical adjustments, this has a height adjustment of 3.54 inches from its lowest setting to its highest. It can swivel 15 degrees to the left or to the right, and can tilt 5 degrees forwards and 15 degrees backwards. Next, let's look at the panel settings. The menu buttons are on the bottom of the panel, but you can also adjust this using the remote. The menu is the same that you will find on any of the other Sceptre monitors. Here I want to cover the picture tab and the presets first, which are pretty decent, and I've been using the movie preset personally. With this, you have movie, user, standard, RTS, FPS, and Eco. You have the option to turn on dynamic contrast with any of these presets, and the user preset allows you to adjust the backlight, brightness, and contrast, but the other presets do not. After that, you can adjust the sharpness and multi-window, which is for picture-by-picture for 2 or 4 inputs. Next, you have the color tab where you can adjust the color temperature between normal, cool, user, and warm. User allows you to adjust the red, green, and blue colors, and in the advanced tab you can adjust cyan, magenta, and yellow. After that, you have gamma, tint, saturation, and blue light shift that you can adjust. Last is the system tab where you can adjust the overdrive, which has off, low, medium, and high. I've kept mine on medium because high has inverse ghosting, while low and off has more apparent ghosting. Medium seems like the best sweet spot here in my opinion. After that, you can enable FreeSync, and if you have an NVIDIA GPU, you can enable G-Sync compatibility mode. I've used this monitor with this on and off, and it helps a little, but I don't know how many people will notice the difference unless you have a much older GPU. Next, you can enable HDR, adjust the OSD, and adjust the volume, which is set to 50% by default like most other monitors, so you'll want to turn this most likely up to 100% when you get this set up. Speaking of the speakers though, let's do a quick sound test for these. I have the camera roughly 3 to 4 feet away from the monitor, which is my same sitting distance, and I'll showcase 100 to 25% volume and 25% increments with this. Now that I've covered these specs, let's talk about what I like about this monitor, starting with the gaming experience, which has been amazing. Having played on this for a little over 2 months now, I get the appeal of these super ultra wide monitors. This is such a huge monitor, it does take a second to adjust to, but it makes gaming incredibly immersive. The colors here are good, not the best I've seen out of the box, but with some adjustments to the panel settings and the NVIDIA or AMD control panel, this can look really good. I haven't noticed any color banding in games either, which is great, and blacklight bleed here is very minimal. The video doesn't do it justice here, it makes it look much brighter than it actually is. White out of the box can lean a little red, but again, if you adjust this, you can make this look really good. I have noticed you will need to toy around with the field of view for each game though to nail that down, otherwise it will look a little bit off. Some games may not be optimized for this large of a display either. I noticed with V Rising, which is an early access game, it could display the resolution, but with certain areas it would look pixelated and like the sharpness was way off. The game overall looks really good, but like I said, certain areas were just not as good as they could be, but I think this has to do more with the optimization of the game and not so much the monitor. Otherwise, I would have noticed the same issue across all of the games that I've played, which I didn't. You can see this same issue with optimization with the frame rate for V Rising, as well as it's not graphically demanding, but I'm getting 32 to 41 FPS on average with my RTX 3080. And I'm getting high FPS with other games that are far more graphically demanding than this one. So again, it just depends on the game and whether or not it's been optimized for this ultra wide monitor or not. I think this monitor will be most useful for content creators and streamers though. You can enable the split screen mode, which will turn this into two 27-inch monitors, eliminating the seam you would have if you were just using two separate monitors. This also works for using a console, so you could have this split between two consoles or your PC and a console. I got to try this out, and with the Xbox Series X, I was surprised this was able to do 1440p at the 120Hz or upscale to 4K. You can enable 4K on PC with this split in picture by picture also. I did a test with Halo Infinite on PC and the Xbox Series X side by side, which was a pretty cool experience. I don't know how practical this would be necessarily in terms of playing this split between a console and a PC, but it was still pretty cool. For content creators, this is great if you do any video editing. The extra space allows for an easy workflow. In fact, editing video for the unboxing video that I did and this review has been easy to do because I can see so much more in Premiere Pro. It also helps when lining Premiere Pro up with Google Docs so I can read my scripts for these videos while monitoring the audio in real time. Last, the mechanical adjustments here are really good and the remote is a nice touch. The menu buttons are on the bottom middle of the panel and you have 4 of them, which I personally prefer just one button for ease of use, but the remote here makes this much easier to navigate. Just make sure you don't accidentally lose it. Next, let's cover what I don't like about this monitor, and it's 2 major things: HDR and the price. Starting with the HDR, it feels tacked on. It's not something I would personally buy this monitor for or even use much. I'm not a big fan on HDR right now because the better HDR monitors cost so much, and looking at Scepter's C505B-QSN168, which is a 34-inch ultra-wide with a 1000R curve, and it has HDR 1000 with 16 local dimming zones. If I needed HDR, I would personally go with that over this, especially if I was on a budget, because that monitor is $430 typically, and this one is obviously a lot more expensive, which is the next big concern with this monitor for me, or negative here, which is the price, as Scepter's website suggests this for $1,700, but it's typically listed for $1,300 on Amazon, and at that price point, there are too many other options out there that are newer with better specs, like the Samsung G9, which is a 49-inch ultra-wide VA QLED panel with a 1000R curve and a 240Hz refresh rate. Now, this is $1,300 to $1,500 for that monitor, but it can be found on sale for $1,200. So at $100 cheaper than the Scepter on sale, the G9 would be the superior monitor. The Scepter, though, can be found for as low as $900, and that's where you have to decide what your budget allows for and what the specs are that you need. If I'm on a budget, the Sceptre is a great deal at $900, and although the G9 on sale is tempting, I would want to make sure the extra money is worth it to me. Certain things like the 1000R curve is something I would want to make sure I would like, and if my hardware can even take advantage of the 240 Hertz that has. The big thing between the two, though, is going to be the QLED panel versus this regular LED panel. The QLED is going to look better than this, but it's going to lean a little bit red typically with that. But again, you could most likely adjust those things to nail down the look. Last, let's cover the gray area, which are things you may or may not care about or should at least be aware of. Starting with the refresh rate here, it's 120 Hertz, and that's something to consider. Although I think it plays smooth, it might not be enough if you're used to 165 Hertz or 240 Hertz monitors. The ghosting here is about on par with what I would personally expect for the specs in panel type. I don't think it's the best or the worst I've seen and is middle of the road, but for some people who are used to faster response time monitors, it might be too much for them even with overdrive enabled. For casual gamers, this will be fine, and the trade-off of the response time for extra monitor space will be something to consider. For hardcore gamers and enthusiasts, it might be too much ghosting, but it really depends on what your eyes can see. It does feel like a little bit of a trade-off though between the extra size and a faster response time. Next, the speakers are decent, but considering the size, I would have liked them to get a little bit louder. I think for some people, they will be just fine. They won't sound as good as higher end external speakers, but most people use headsets for better sound quality anyways, and that's actually myself included. The panel doesn't feature any lights on it, which I don't mind, but for some people that might be a bummer. Now, most lights on monitors you don't really see much unless they are close to a wall and it's dark in the room, but considering the size of this monitor, I could see that being better if they span the whole backside of the panel. But this shouldn't be a deal breaker for anyone, and if you really need lights on your monitor, it is an extra cost, but I would look into the Govee Dreamview Pro, which is a light setup that has 2 tall standing light bars and a light strip that mounts onto the back of the monitor. It uses a camera to pick up on the colors that the display is showcasing, and then it translates that to the light system. It's a really cool addition to any setup, but it is an extra cost that you would actually have to consider with, hey, I bought this really expensive monitor, I want lights, now I'm shelling out anywhere from $130 to $180 for these lights that I want with this. But it actually lights up the whole backside wall, and it actually has that extra feature where it's translating the lights that you're actually picking up on the display to the lights. So it's more than just lights. It has some other cool features that it does with it, but again, it's just an extra cost. I'll have a link for my review in the description if you want to watch that. Last, this doesn't have any extra USB ports, which I would have personally liked, but I know not everyone will need that. Well, that's going to be it for this one. This is a big monitor with a lot to offer, and if you can get this on sale, I think it's a great buy. There are a lot of things to think about with this, of course, though, as more super ultra wide monitors with higher refresh rates, faster response times, and better panels are coming out, but it really depends on if this is on sale or at its regular price. If it's $1,300, I would go with the Samsung G9, but if it's $900, I would consider this monitor if I was on a tighter budget. If budget isn't an issue at all, then you'll most likely want the latest and greatest like the Samsung G9. I'll have a link for this in the description if you want to pick it up, and if you have any questions about this monitor, let me know in the comment section. If you liked the video, hit the like button for me. If you want to continue to follow along with all my content, hit the subscribe button for me, and as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.